So tomorrow is the solstice. It's the longest day of the year in the northern hemisphere, and I keep thinking about how fitting that is for for what we're going to be talking about, because this is a moment for me that naturally has been making me stop. I think has been making everyone stop and take stock. Right, half our year is gone, and whether you mean to or not, you start kind of asking yourself, "Is this life that I'm building? Is this still the life that I want?"
Have you noticed what happens for most people when they actually ask themselves that, though? Because I don't think that the honest answer is usually no. I think it's closer to I'm not sure. And not because things are bad necessarily, but because the picture they were working toward just doesn't look like the way they thought it would. And I think that gap doesn't just make people sad, it makes people angry. Like at the timing, at the rules that have changed, at everything that's happened without warning, maybe even at themselves a little for believing the rules in the first place. And that anger doesn't have anywhere clean to go because it's not pointed at one person. So it just sits there and it leaks out sideways into whoever's the closest to them.
Oh my God. Yes. And that's exactly what I was talking about with you before. And we said, we got to dig into this, right? So, hey, everybody, welcome back to High Heels to Happy Feels. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Natalie. So let's get into the gap and the anger underneath that nobody's planned for.
Let's do. I actually want to start with something because this time it's about a friend. And I know we have a lot of friends, um, but we've been around a while, right? So we should have a lot of friends, or at least a lot of people we know. And this friend said something to me last week, and it really stuck with me ever since she said it. And it may have been brought on right because we were talking about blueprints last week a lot
Mhm,
in
mhm.
our podcast. She'd had a totally normal day. Nothing was wrong. She snapped at her coffee barista over something so small, truly so petty. She couldn't even explain it after. And she said, "I don't know where it came from. I'm just not an angry person." And I honestly looked at her and asked her, "Are you sure?"
Oh.
Right? She got quiet for a second. She admitted that she's actually a lot she's lately she's been a lot more furious about everything, and she just hasn't been calling it that. The
Mhm.
job didn't go where she planned. The timeline that quietly stopped applying to her. She'd been calling all of it fine and adjusting, and it turns out some of that adjusting had a lot more teeth in it than she'd let herself notice. You know that feeling of where you let it fume underneath and you're just like, "Fine, I'm fine, I'm fine." And she's
Right.
furious.
Well, and you bring up a good point because you ask everybody like, "How's your day?" The automatic response is fine. But anyway, does
Right.
did it surprise you though that it took someone else asking that question for her to actually find that? Did that surprise her?
I don't think so, honestly. I think most people just don't go looking for it on their own. I mean, why
Yeah.
would you? Right? Why would you go looking for that if there's nothing on fire and you're functioning and you're cruising through life? So, unless someone holds up a mirror to you and looks at you and asks you those kind of direct questions, the anger just, it's an unnamed thing and it does its thing quietly in the background. And there's a lot of it right now.
You know, we're the more we talk, they're like, we are just mirrors for people. But anyway,
Right? We are. And that's all everybody is. I mean, if we're all being cognizant of it and just going, just reflect, right? Look
yeah,
at yourself. Yeah.
look at yourself. Exactly. But you know,
Yeah.
it's strange that that's the story because that kind of tracks with something I noticed with a colleague recently.
Ooh.
Completely. He is composed in meetings, like always composed, handling string of real changes and challenges at work with total grace on the surface, and then absolutely lit up over something tiny. I think it was like a scheduling mix-up. We were on a call and trying to get schedules aligned, completely out of proportion to what was actually going on. And no one on the call thought anything beyond like, it's just a tough day for him. But watching it happen, I kept thinking that is not about the calendar.
Wow. What do you think it was actually about? Like, if you had to guess.
Probably the same thing as your friend. If you don't have anywhere to put a big feeling, it comes out in the small thing instead, because the small thing is just safer to be mad at. because nobody questions you for being annoyed about a scheduling conflict. They'd absolutely question you for being furious about a timeline that quietly stopped applying to you 5 years ago.
Right. And I
Hmm.
think that's exactly why this is so hard to talk about. There's nothing specific enough to point to. It's the accumulation of all of it. It's the retirement math shifted a little. The friend group changed shape. The job stayed longer than planned. None of these are emergencies as individual items in our lives, but together
Right.
they add up and they give us this feeling of like, I don't know, I keep waiting to feel settled. And the target won't stand still. It just shifts on me. And somewhere underneath all of that, that simmering in all of us is this isn't fair. And that just doesn't have anywhere clean to land.
Yeah, here's what I keep turning over though. Some of those shifts, like people chose them. And
True.
I mean,
Absolutely true. Yeah.
yeah, and we talked about, I mean, they at least participated in them. Like the job staying longer wasn't just something that happened. It's like two people moving and not one. Like those things were chosen. So if you're angry about something you actually had a hand in, where does that anger even go?
Oh my God. And I think that's honestly the harder version of this question, isn't it?
Mhm.
Because if it just happened to you, you get to be a little bit of a victim, right? Of that process. And the anger has somewhere obvious to land. Unless you're like the head Cheeto in charge, and then everybody's a victim, right? Or he's a victim of everything.
Right,
I mean,
right, yeah.
okay. But if you made choices that got you here, even good choices, even the necessary ones, the anger just doesn't have a villain. So it just floats around you. It's like looking for somewhere to go, which is so much more complicated, I think, because there's no, it's a more complicated place to stand, right?
Yeah, it really, really is.
Yeah. So I'm going to name a few of these. I think this is a really good opportunity for like our mirror moments. Um, dog butt. Sorry, there she went. Okay.
There she is.
There's Luna. Yay. So a few of these things, because I think hearing it reflected back, like my friend did, really helps people breathe a little bit and maybe stop
Hmm.
being so hard on themselves. I know it works really good for us when we call each other on things, right? When you actually say it, you're like, "Ew, yuck. All right,
Right,
grumpy
right,
fused," right? So it really helps us call out that short fuse if we've developed one. So if you stayed at a job longer than you planned, and then you made that call, or maybe the market shifted, and maybe your priorities shifted, maybe the timing was wrong. You made a decision with the information you had. And if you've noticed that you're snappier about work stuff than you used to be, that's just not random. If you're recalibrating what's on track, what that even means right now, that's not you giving up on yourself.
Mhm.
That's you being honest about what's changed. So even if some days it comes out as a snap, right? Irritation instead of clarity. Like if your financial picture looks different than the version of it you imagined. Some of that is yours, choices you made, things you prioritized over time, but that math may be changed and that's just real. And if you've caught yourself unreasonably furious at a grocery receipt lately because of all this like math you've been doing, it's probably not actually anything to do with the receipt, right?
Right. So
Yeah.
can I ask you something about the friendship one specifically? Because
Yeah.
I think that's the quietest version of this. And I want to make sure we're actually landing it. Like the people you thought were going to be your people, they shifted and you shifted too. And nobody did anything wrong. You just ended up in different places. Do you think the anger in that one is harder to access? Like exactly because there's no villain to point it at?
And that's valid. And I think it might be the hardest one actually, because grief and processing that without a villain um, is at least understood. People know how to comfort someone who's sad about a friendship fading, but anger about a villain makes people uncomfortable, including the person that's actually feeling it. So I think it tends to just get buried under that grief instead of getting its own space. And anger, it needs its own space, right? So that you can acknowledge it and get it out of there, in my
Which,
opinion. Yeah.
yeah, and it probably means it shows up somewhere else instead, like the same way the scheduling mix-up did.
Absolutely. Right. And then there's the one where I think most people are embarrassed by, which is being in another round of figuring out who you are. Oops, she's back. Um, or what you actually want when you think about who you are and part of you assumed you'd already be done asking that question by now. Like, shouldn't this be settled? Shouldn't I already know this answer? Right.
Well, and the honest answer is for a lot of people, apparently not. Like, and it's I think it's common. That
I
might
agree.
that might just be what staying awake to your own life looks like, even when it makes you irritable about it. None of these are emergencies individually, but something about all of them being soft and unresolved at the same time makes it hard to explain to anyone what's actually going on, including the part where you've been a little short with people who don't deserve it. Like you're okay, you just can't find the floor, and then not finding it has an edge to it.
Yeah. And I know we've done some episodes in the past, like around the not finding in the floor and I mean all of these themes, but it's where we are. It's where we are. And yet we're all still here, right? Here you are. So we're all still making decisions. We're all still showing up. We're all still in it.
Yeah, absolutely still in it.
Yeah. So here's something I've been sitting with since last week's conversation, right?
Mm,
We were handed that specific picture of what stability looks like. And we talked about this a little bit last week, like talking
mm.
about kind of that formula, the job, the house, that one identity that you grow into, your 5-year plan that executes on schedule. And if you hit those things, you're stable. You're so good. You made it. And if you don't, you're behind or you took a wrong turn someplace. Uh, Even if life looks just fine in front of you, right?
Yeah, does it bother you as much as it bothers me that the picture itself was kind of a myth to begin with? And you're right. We kind of talked about this, but it's been sitting with us, so we're just gonna bring it back up.
Yeah, we're bringing it up again because we're trying to
Yeah.
fill that hole.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're
and
filling the gap.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're talking about the really okay, so that's what it is. We're talking about the gap from here to there. Because I
Yes.
keep coming back to that. Like this picture really did work for a specific generation, for a specific economic and cultural moment. And then it just got passed down like that was still true. Like the conditions hadn't completely changed underneath. And I think that happens every generation because women used to stay home. And
Hmm.
like that didn't change until World War II. And like everything has shifted. And I think it shifts in each generation. And we keep getting handed this picture. And so we keep saying, oh, we want to go back to a simpler time. Well, for us, like computers, internet, smartphones, AI, like we are just seeming to shift faster.
Agreed. And it does bother me a little bit because we've absorbed it without questioning a thing. I mean,
Mm.
we built an entire internal measuring system around something that has never really, in our opinion, as we talk about this, never applied to us in the first place. And now these people who did everything right genuinely, I mean, I listen to all the when you're listening to like different news things and all these college students are talking about how they can't get a job. And
Hmm.
yet they're shooting the moon. They're asking for like 70 grand coming out of the gate in a profession where 75% of their class graduated in the same thing. Hello, McFly. That's not going to work, right? So it's also some of the things that we set for ourselves. But and don't get me started on the tradwise. Good God. Hello. Could you try to
Right.
set us back, women? You all, I'll bet you $10. They all have their own credit card and their own thing going
Right.
on. You wouldn't have any of that, sister. Settle down. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You bring up like a very specific moment that my older
Mm,
son, who has a friend graduating with their master's and is shocked that the job market isn't just open and ready to pay him what he's been told he's worth with a master's
right?
degree. Like that picture has shifted
It
completely
has.
while you were at school.
Absolutely. And you feel like a failure because that picture that you've been given about, You do this, you do the work, you go to college, you get out, you have a job, and it's going to pay you a whole lot, and you're going to be there for this many years. And now these generations have two or three careers, not, you know, two or three jobs, but they'll have
Right.
multiple careers. And at our time, it was maybe two careers, and in our parents' time, it was one career, at least prior to them. You you worked at the same company for 40 years, and then you retired and you had pension, and that was it.
Right,
And
right.
it
That's not it anymore.
no, it is not it, because number one, we have evolved in terms of all the different things that we have. So it, we we have opportunities ahead of us. But what that does overall is it can create, and what it is creating for what we're seeing right now is disappointment, because you're setting yourself up for failure because your expectations that you're setting are against something that doesn't exist anymore. Right.
Right.
And so you're being handed a map that doesn't match the territory you're in.
I think some people are exhausted, not because like life is terrible, all of those things we've just talked about, but because life has required an incredible amount of adaptation for all of the things that we've talked about in a very short period of time. And I think that's connected to something else everyone's been saying lately too. And I'm curious what you make of, do you think everybody's just gotten meaner? Like comment
Yeah,
sections and group chats, and the guy who cuts you off and gives you a look like you've done something wrong. And I've seen that everywhere. And it just, I mean, I work from home, so, but when I'm out, it just seems to be excessive.
yeah, I know. I know. And part of it, I mean, really politically, it's a lot is our environment, right? Because if when you're traveling someplace else where people are nicer, you don't see that as much. But it's
Mm.
like, why does everybody feel the need to be so rude? And there's actually a lot of research on this, right? This study, The Illusion of Moral Decline. And the finding is basically that every generation for decades has believed people are getting ruder. So part of what we're feeling is just a permanent feature of being a person watching the world, right? Being one of those next generation older people now, because every generation thinks it's much more polite than the last one.
But is that the whole explanation, or is there something real actually happening underneath this illusion?
Oh, I think there's a piece that isn't an illusion. I
Mm.
mean, we've seen research, right, that shows that people genuinely feel less accountable for how they act online than when they do it face to face.
Yeah.
Something like a third of people surveyed say they'll fire off a nasty comment specifically because they're already angry about something else entirely. Has nothing to do with the post itself, but because, or, or it could be just about how they feel about that person. It has nothing to do with their comment. They just don't like that person. So because of whatever they were already carrying in, they're throwing it out.
Which is
Yeah.
exactly the mechanism we have been talking about, I think, this whole episode. Like
Yeah.
a lot of that carried anger is precisely the gap between the picture and the reality, with nowhere clean for it to land. So it lands on a stranger's comment or on a barista like your friend or a
Yeah.
slow driver or the short fuse. Like it's those things that just explode because that gap and it's it's finding a place for it to go.
Yeah. And I think it's worth saying really clearly that you're not powerless inside this.
Mhm.
You can choose. We all have choices. I mean, every single thing you do is a choice. You can choose to stop measuring yourself by a picture that was never built for you or your actual life in the first place. And it's not a small thing. It's a decision, it's a conscious decision that you have to make, because the default will always pull you back toward that old metric and the old angers that come with it and the programming, right?
Mhm.
Everything that comes with missing it, right? Missing your target.
Which is a lot easier to say than actually feel in the moment.
Much easier said than felt. Yeah. Because what I think is slowly emerging, and I do mean slowly, is a different definition of stability. One that isn't about arriving somewhere fixed. It's really more about trusting yourself, right? To adapt, to make those good decisions inside of the uncertainty that comes with it, to know you're not one shift or one step away from a collapse.
Hmm.
And you can't check that off a list, but you can build it. And I think a lot of people have been quietly building exactly that. They just don't realize it, that they're even doing this the whole time because they're still carrying some completely understandable anger, that hidden rage about the map that they were handed that they don't realize isn't for them at all.
That reframe is kind of doing something for me right now, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that feels that's got teeth.
It does. And astrologically, I gotta say, so this week um has some rare air underneath of it, right? Because and I don't want to not talk about this again. We talked about this a little last week, but Chiron, which is our wounded healer, changed signs yesterday as we're recording, June 19th. It moved in out of Aries, where it's been parked for the last 8 years, and into Taurus. Chiron hasn't been in an Earth sign since 1984.
So why does
So,
that particular shift matter for everything that we're talking about?
Hey there. Every week, Natalie and I talk about our soul pillars on our High Heels to Happy Feels episodes. I would highly encourage you head to immersivespirit.com/soul pillars and check out these free tools. There's different things you can download to learn more about interacting with your body, heart, mind, and spirit, and how easy it is to develop your intuition, even at a much higher level with these free tools. We've loved creating them. We really hope you'll take advantage of them. They are free. immersivespirit.com/soul pillars. And now back to high heels to happy feels.
well, again, Chiron is that wounded healer. So wherever it sits, it points at the place where we're most tender. And it's asking us to really look at it instead of managing. So we're looking at our wound instead of
Mhm.
trying to manage around it all the time. So for 8 years in Aries, all of that tenderness was about identity. Aries is I am, right? It's all about me. What's my path? Now it's moved into Taurus, that sign of security, self worth, what you actually have versus what you're worried you don't. It's an earth sign, so it's going to get more grounded, which
Mhm.
lines up almost exactly with the gap that we've all been circling this episode. The picture versus the reality, because that wound moves from who I am to do I actually have enough and am I actually enough?
That's a lot.
It is a lot. It's a lot.
Like that's a
It's
big shift from I am to asking the question of really am I? I mean, that's
it
what it feels
is.
like. That's kind of like a whoa.
It is, right? And you can almost picture that arrow in your wound like, ow, man, somebody pull it out and stitch it up. But yes, that's exactly it. And then early Wednesday morning, the moon, which is, our emotion, it's our moods, it's our gut reactions, it sits in direct opposition to Chiron. So that's the moment this week where that fresh wound around your worth is most likely going to surface as a feeling instead of a thought. You might even know why you feel raw, why you snap at someone. You just will. So if Wednesday feels like an off day for no clear reason, that's probably why.
Is there anything gentler in this mix, or is it just one rough patch? Like really?
There's a little kinder thread after it, actually. So Thursday morning, Venus and Saturn will line up in a way that's genuinely supportive. So it'll be a good day for real conversation to actually land instead of just bouncing off of each other. So if you've been sitting on something that's really honest, you want to say to someone, Thursday is really going to give you unusually good odds of it being received really well. So Wednesday's going to crack something open. Thursday's when you can actually talk about it instead of just all the feels that you're going to feel with it.
And we're gonna
Yeah.
need Thursday to recover from Wednesday because apparently we're gonna be on a terror Wednesday. Yeah. All right.
It's right.
The part that
Ah.
ties us back to the anger and the meanness conversation.
Yeah, that's the rest of the week, basically. Like
Oh,
Tuesday and
great.
Wednesday both bring the moon into friction with Pluto. So control, intensity. Friday morning, that moon goes head to head with Mars. That stretch is genuinely more combustible than usual, probably because of what we've already dealt with earlier in the week, right? So it makes it an easy, short fuse power struggle. People digging in over things that aren't actually an issue. So if Tuesday through Friday feel like everyone around you has slightly less patience than usual, including you, not your imagination. It's real, nameable stretch, and it passes. And by the weekend, the moon's moved into some nice, easy company. Energy shifts again on Sunday when Mars changes signs. Yeah.
So I got it. I got it. So I want to highlight when you say passes, I happened to watch some stuff with Gaia over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember where I picked this up. Anyway, this too shall pass in
This
both
too
a
shall
humble
pass.
way and a um hurting way, a suffering way. If you look at those words, this too shall pass, it works for both when you're
Everything.
suffering and when you're, yeah, and when you're hungry. So rough patch midweek, easier landing by the weekend.
Yes. And that's the whole stack. None of it is super alarming, right? Chiron's just asking that deepest version of the question. Do you feel worthy of what you actually have? And it all goes back to that gap and what we've been talking about. And this week's timing is just telling you which days that question and the anger that sits underneath of it are going to be the loudest.
Interesting. Okay,
But
so
I love this too shall pass. That is such an old saying. I remember that from one of grandma's things. Wasn't it grandma that had one of those hanging?
it's an
Or
old
is it a philosopher?
I so the story, and I don't know where I recently heard this, but the story was like a king asked one of his court, one of the people that served him, I need a saying that I can put on this that is going to serve me in times of great joy and great sadness. And it took the person to come up with weeks, and then they came back and the statement was, this too shall pass. So it was cool.
And it's perfect
It is.
because those really great moments where you're playing with your grandbabies, your children, your nieces, your nephews, your friends, your loved ones, your lover, it'll pass. And the heartache and the tenderness and all those things, it'll pass. This too shall pass.
Yeah,
Mm,
exactly.
perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
thinking about something, and this isn't mine this time. Um, it just kind of reminds me of everything we're talking about, but it makes the
Mhm.
point better than my any own story would. So I have a friend who spent years with that very clear picture of what the stretch looks like, what your next thing is going to be, like what it's going to look like professionally and personally. And maybe some of you folks who are listening to this, like maybe you want to move to another country, or maybe you have your retirement so planned out that you know your retirement date 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or 15, like however that looks. And she was really holding on to it really, really tightly. And if something she just kept executing on, she kept moving, she'd eventually arrive somewhere that felt like solid ground.
Did she ever stay kept her moving that long without stopping to actually check?
Well, and that's actually the most interesting part of everything that she's told me is that the executing itself became a way of not having to question the picture. So you stay
Ah,
busy enough and you never have to ask whether you're going in the right direction. You just keep going. So it's completely
yeah,
rational
interesting.
response to the uncertainty.
Hmm.
Like just keep moving. Don't look too hard on whether the destination is still right.
And it's so true.
Right?
Everyone does that, right? And so, what made her actually stop and finally look?
It was something fairly small. And honestly, she didn't go into the specifics with me. But when she did finally slow down enough to actually look, what she found was that the circumstances were wrong. It was that she hadn't adjusted for everything that had happened, like all the gap stuff, which is
Hmm.
why I bring up this specific conversation with exactly a coworker. But not that that matters.
Right?
Um, but but all of the adjusting, all of the things that she just hadn't, she didn't, yeah. It was absolutely crazy, and it matches this episode so much. And then when she did stop and those adjustments hit her in the face, and she's like, that picture is not my reality anymore. There was a lot of grief because that hurts. Like everything you've been working towards, like this was years in the making. She had been on this path, like she wanted to be going to executive level and she wanted to do this and do that. And it also came with anger, which is a lot that we're talking about in this episode too,
Hmm.
at herself for not stepping back, not trusting the things that she had seen, not understanding, not just accepting the adjustments. And I think we are all so guilty of that.
I agree.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a lot when you step back and you see it all at once.
Hmm.
And she said, she didn't step back and do any of this consciously. She just kept moving and let that picture quietly stop fitting without her ever actually saying goodbye to it or admitting that she was furious that it hadn't worked out the way she was told that it would.
Did she say what it actually looked like trying to say goodbye to both the picture and the anger? And, it's interesting because I would, I mean, did she ever say anything about the anger toward others or the jealousy of others or things like that too? Because the anger, I would think, wouldn't be just self. I would think it would be like angry at the world, like we are in social media, you know?
Right. And so, again, so she's a coworker, so like she's not a close friend. So she didn't necessarily share the details with me, but I think it comes to admitting both things exist, like the anger and the grief, which sounds simple, and I don't think it is.
I don't think it is either. I don't think that's all. I think it takes more courage to deal with that. I think, and we're going to talk about the soul pillars here in a second because they really play into a lot of this. But
Mm,
you mentioned something here that I think is so interesting, and that's the busyness, right? If you're busy, if we stay busy, you don't have to acknowledge anything. You're busy, 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 busy. I've been doing all this, but then when you do have that 30 minutes of downtime and you look at your list, you're like, and I've accomplished nothing. And the guilt
my
and the
God, so
anger
true.
and the rage, all of those things set in because now you haven't done anything and you feel like I got to be busier. So now you're not sleeping. Now you're not doing this. Now you're not doing that.
I wonder
And
if that's like a bigger overknown thing of like we just can't sit still anymore. I can't sit still. Every time I'm still, I'm like, oh, I've got to be doing something for this, that, or the other.
right, right. You just can't. I mean, even if we're sitting still, you're like, okay, so I should be reading a book.
Right. I should be studying, making myself better, doing something for myself.
Right, right. I should be. I should. And it's like, no, I think I'm just going to lay here.
And the anger and the guilt that comes from that feeling is
Exactly. Absolutely. So let's talk about where these show up for soul pillars because I think putting this in this context too and adding a little bit of our own context about like what we were just talking about there with the guilt that comes from not being an overachiever
right.
or a perceived feeling of not being overachiever.
Not
So
going after that picture as hard as we can every second of the damn day.
exactly, exactly. I mean, in our mind, it's our brains. It's that pattern recognition machines, right? Our brains constantly want to know what's coming so I can prepare for it. So when things stay in soft motion, the mind will keep scanning. And that's what we're talking about, right? That busyness keeps trying to locate the pattern and then it's scanning. It's exhausting, even when there's
Hmm.
nothing wrong. And it's not anxiety exactly. It's and I love this. We put these in our notes, but it's just the engine running with nowhere to park. We have a car running and we have nowhere to park it.
I saw you note that for mine, and I was like, that is brilliant.
Right.
But
It's a good
okay,
one.
so is that why you can wake up tired or short-tempered on a day when nothing bad actually happens?
Yes, exactly. Exactly
Yeah,
that.
the mind's been working all night, even though you were asleep. Totally makes sense. In the
Hmm.
heart. Okay, so because I don't think this one gets a lot of space. So let's talk about it. Sometimes you're not grieving the thing that changed. You are grieving this picture we're talking about. And right alongside that grief and often underneath of it is the anger that we've mentioned. At the picture for being a myth, at yourself for believing it, and at nobody in particular, which is exactly why it's so hard to release. The anger is real, even when the actual outcome is fine. And you are allowed to feel it without justifying it with a specific villain.
I love that. I think people feel guilty about being angry
Hmm.
about something that technically didn't even happen, right? But the picture was so real. You built things around it. Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
a lot.
absolutely.
That's a lot. You have to let that go someplace. And that's where that heart energy comes in. So when we talk about the body, um, where does this actually land physically?
So change reads as a threat before it reads as opportunity. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish between danger and unfamiliar. So even chosen change, even good change, can leave your body feeling unsettled and primed and ready to snap at something. And that low hum of irritability isn't something that you're being cinematic about, like dramatic. It's your system doing exactly what it's built to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So
Mhm.
if you can recognize it as just the system doing its job, you can probably be a little more patient with yourself and with whoever happens to be standing nearest to you
Right.
when it surfaces.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then in spirit, I keep coming back to the idea that maybe life isn't taking stability away from us. Maybe it's asking us to build a different kind. So, um, I almost feel like I've said that. I think maybe I said that in our last episode. Like that's it, it keeps coming
It,
back.
uh-huh. It's
And one,
resurfacing, but it makes sense right
yeah,
now. Hmm.
it is. And it's isn't dependent on things staying still like that lives in your capacity to adapt, to make decisions, to come back to yourself and to actually feel the anger about that old picture instead of letting it leak sideways and, like you said, to whoever's just standing around you.
Right. And that's not a smaller thing to build. I think it's just I think it's actually harder. It's just more doable, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and more and much more durable too. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh
So
yeah, absolutely.
the tool this week is like let's just think about it in two pictures. So what stability looked like in your mind 10 years ago? Not what you had, what you pictured stability was going to be. What did the stable version of your life look like back then?
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. I mean, I'll pick up here again in a second because I have a question to follow up there, but if I can remember it, which I hopefully will. But I'm thinking about when you're like 18, right? And you're first out of high school and how you envision your next 5 years or your life's going to go. And then when you're 21, and then when you're 25, and then when you're 30, and then when you're 40, and then when you're 50. Is it look at that, go back
Well,
and
and celebrate how adaptable you were in between those pictures.
right. And the parts where it did go wrong, how
Hmm.
awesome it turned out for you because you went off the path, because it didn't turn out the way you planned, the way you wrote down, the way your 5 year, 10 year, 20 year life plan agenda, whatever that was, because it didn't work out. Look at the awesomeness of where you are at this moment.
Right, which will totally prepare you for the second half of the tool.
I love that. I mean, and that's because that's what actually feels stable today, right? It's not what looks successful. It's not what impresses anyone. And it's not what your younger self had managed and imagined at all. But this is what genuinely is going to make you feel safe and grounded. And I mean, it's how are you able to breathe right now? Right?
Yeah. How would you suggest someone actually sit with the gap between the two answers? Like, what did it look like 10 years ago or when you were 18 or however, and what does that look like now?
Yeah. And without judging it immediately. That's the main thing because you can do
Mhm.
this in your head. You can journal it. You know, we would tell you to journal it. You can talk it
Right.
through with somebody, but just let those pictures exist side by side first because the gap isn't failure, it's information. It shows you where you've changed, where you've grown, what you've chosen, what actually matters to you now versus what you thought you would matter, would matter to you. Oh, hello,
Hello,
girl.
Luna Boona.
Yeah, huh. That would matter for you. Hi, you want to say something? Yeah.
Right?
Oh, okay. Yep, she says no anger. Because if that anger's sitting there with us, right? If it's sitting in that gap, give it a name instead of a target. Because that's not nothing, that's a lot.
And it might show you that you've been building something real all along. just not the thing that you originally set out to build.
Absolutely. And we talked a lot last week about that framework or about the
Blueprints.
blueprint,
Yep.
right? And so this is taking that up a notch in your framework and saying, name it. Put names to that sucker and then own the stuff that was not following that perfect plan in the past. So I'm going to close with, we keep talking about the stability is it's a destination and once you arrive you stay. But I'm not sure it's ever actually worked that way. The most grounded people I know aren't the ones who live lives that stayed still, that were there in that same box all the time. They're the ones who stopped needing everything and that made peace with being angry about whatever it was for whatever they were dealing with on the way there.
What does that actually look like day to day, do you think? Making peace with the anger instead of just managing around it.
I think it starts with letting the anger be about the gap instead of about the next person who cut you off in traffic, about the barista, about any of those things, right? It's not about the ground stopping, it's about what you're standing on inside of yourself. So, anger included, because you got to include the anger, it's part of who we are. So, maybe that stability isn't the ground staying still. Maybe stability is knowing you can move with it, that you can be flexible, feel everything that comes with it, right? Ride that wave and still be standing.
I really like that. I like that.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Good. So thanks for spending time again with us, folks. You
Yes.
have anything else?
Nope. Just a reminder from me in this one to join our community, immersive-spirit.com. It is free the first 30 days. We have so many killer free tools. We just put out a really great one for all the lunar and Sabbath and all these different cycles. But come join us. We would love to have you there. Have an amazing summer solstice or in the Northern Hemisphere, winter solstice to our friends in the Southern Hemisphere. Immersivespirit.com will take you everywhere you want to go. So join us there. Please like, subscribe, and share our channel. We are so grateful to be getting to almost 33,000 subscribers. We could not do this without you, and we are so eternally grateful. So, from High Heels to Happy Feels, and from Immersive Spirit, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Natalie.
Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you again next week for another episode.